Hey guys, tonight we begin with something special. This is a journey into a quieter corner of the past, where stories are not loud with battles or victories, but soft, with the small rituals that came before an ending. Before we step into tonight's story, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, so these forgotten memories can drift a little farther, maybe even reaching others in your family who need a gentle way to fall asleep. And in the comments, tell me your location and the exact time you're listening. It's always fascinating to see those tiny lights glowing on a map across the world, each one of you listening quietly, together, though apart. Now, let's begin. The morning in Victorian London was never bright in the way you might imagine it today. The sun, if it rose, did so behind a heavy curtain of soot and fog, a haze that seemed stitched into the very fabric of the city. The air was thick before the day had even begun, tasting faintly of coal dust that settled on windowsills, rooftops, and the lips of anyone who breathed too deeply. A city built upon fire had no choice but to dress itself in smoke. To walk the streets at dawn was to wander through a place still half asleep, where lamplighters had only just put out the last of the night flames, and shopkeepers stirred reluctantly behind wooden shutters. The cobblestones were slick from the damp, and every footfall echoed between narrow lanes, mingling with the clatter of horse hooves pulling carts already blackened by ash. Even silence here carried the weight of labor yet to come, as if the city itself sighed under the burden of its own survival. And within that sigh were the smallest figures, children, pale and thin, who belonged not to their homes, but to the chimneys. Their mornings were never marked by breakfast or warmth, but by the rasp of soot in their throats, the weight of tools carried across narrow shoulders, and the knowledge that the day would end the same way it began, blackened and breathless. Imagine, if you will, that you are among them. Your bed is not truly a bed, but a corner of a cellar, or a spot of straw in a workhouse, where the air smells of mildew and unwashed clothes. The first sound you hear is not the chirping of birds, but the sharp tap of a master's cane on the floor, a reminder that time is already wasting. Sleep clings to you in stubborn fragments, but hunger cuts through faster, hollowing your stomach as you rise. There is no time to stretch, no time to yawn, only the urgency of work. The city outside greets you not with softness but with chill. The fog moves like breath across the river, carrying with it the bitter tang of coal that burns in every household. London is alive with smoke long before the rest of the country even stirs. In each home, fires are tended to, not for comfort, but necessity. Fires meant cooking, heating, surviving the damp cold that clung to stone walls. And yet, with every fire lit, every chimney thickened, narrowed, and demanded the smallest of bodies to keep it clear. Your body, perhaps. The streets you walk are not kind to the feet. Mud collects between cobblestones, mixed with the waste of horses and the overflow from gutters. Each step is heavy, yet familiar, as if the road itself knows the countless souls that have trodden upon it. Children moving in silence toward the same fate. The city's grandeur, its tall townhouses with iron railings, its squares lined with polished doors, hides behind the labor of those who will never step inside except through the chimney, crawling where no light dares follow. The morning unfolds slowly. Milk carts roll by, their drivers yawning beneath caps. A bell tolls in the distance, muffled by fog, its sound lingering like a reminder of another world, one where time is measured by routine rather than survival. But you, as a chimney sweep, do not think of bells or clocks. The only measure of your day is the soot that coats your skin, the coughing that rattles in your chest, and the voice of the master who drives you forward with promises of pennies too small to ever matter. It is not the kind of morning one can escape. The air itself presses down like a weight, damp and unyielding. Windows drip with condensation that streaks down blackened glass. The scent of smoke is everywhere, in your hair, in your mouth, in the fabric of your rags. Even before your first climb, you are already marked by it, already swallowed by the city's hunger for fuel. But to walk through this waking world is to glimpse the strange contrast of London life. On one side of the street, Carriages with polished brass carry gentlemen in dark coats, their boots shining despite the mud. On the other, barefoot children shuffle forward, carrying brushes and scrapers, their heads down, their shoulders hunched against the cold. The city is one place, yet two realities, each feeding upon the other. The fires of the wealthy cannot burn without the labor of the poor, and the poor cannot live without the very work that suffocates them. As dawn stretches into morning, the streets grow louder. The hammer of blacksmiths, the chatter of women at water pumps, the clang of shutters opening for trade. Each sound layers over the next until the city hums with restless energy. Yet through it all, the sweep's world remains narrow, focused not on the bustle around him, but on the looming silhouettes of chimneys above, towers of brick that rise like dark throats against the sky. It is strange, perhaps, to think of a chimney as something alive, but to the child who climbs it, the flue becomes a kind of second skin, pressing in close, shaping the body, scraping flesh from bone, as if to remind him of his smallness. Even now, as you walk toward your first house of the day, you feel its presence above you, waiting. The city wakes, yes, but it wakes into hunger, into the endless demand for fire and smoke, and it is you who must answer it. The master walks ahead, his stride firm, his eyes sharp for opportunity. He carries not only tools but ownership of your labor, your hours, your breath. His pockets jingle faintly with coins earned yesterday, but not by his own hands. Behind him trail the sweeps, each one smaller than the last, a line of shadows swallowed by fog. They do not speak, for there is nothing to say. Their silence is not chosen but learned, the quiet acceptance that words cannot change what awaits. And so, the morning grows. The smoke thickens, rising from countless hearths, spreading across rooftops until even the sun seems to surrender. A pale glow filters through, dim and weak, like a candle smothered under glass. You squint against it, but there is no comfort in its light. The world is grey, and you are part of that greyness, another moving shape in a city that thrives on obscurity. Somewhere nearby, a woman throws open her shutters, coughing as she leans out to shake soot from her linens. It falls like black snow onto the street below, settling into the damp until it becomes indistinguishable from the mud. The sweep glances up, knowing without being told that her hearth will soon require attention. Every house does, eventually. The soot never disappears. It only waits, thickening, clogging, darkening the flues until the risk of fire grows too dangerous to ignore. And that is when the smallest hands are called upon to wriggle through the darkness, scraping it clean. But for now, there is only the walk, the slow, steady march of children through a city that does not see them. A city that wakes only to the sound of industry, not to the cries of its laborers. The day has only just begun, yet it already feels endless, stretching forward with the weight of soot that clings to every breath. And you, caught in this waking world of smoke, realize that to last even a single day in the skin of a Victorian chimney sweep is to surrender to the city's rhythm, a rhythm not of comfort or rest, but of work that begins before the streets are fully awake and does not end until the darkness of night swallows the smoke once more. The city wakes, yes, but it does so in smoke, and you are already inside it. The city, heavy with its morning smoke, always asked the smallest to do its darkest work. Children carried the weight of soot long before their bones had finished growing, their hands raw before they had learned to write, their lungs filled before they had tasted clean air. They were the quiet lifeblood of the chimneys, the ones who crawled into spaces too narrow for any grown man, their bodies pressed against walls of brick still warm from the fires below. They were called climbing boys, though the name softened the truth. There was no play in their climb, no joy in their ascent. It was work born of desperation, bought cheaply by masters who saw not faces but frames, measuring children not by age, but by how small a shoulder could turn inside a flue. 6 years old, sometimes younger, was old enough to begin, old enough, in their eyes, to crawl where fire had burned only hours before, To see them in the streets was to notice their size first. They seemed swallowed by the world around them, little more than shadows moving between horses and carts, heads down, rags hanging loosely from bodies that carried no weight of flesh. Their eyes often carried the dull shine of exhaustion, not the brightness of play. You might hear the rasp of their cough before you saw them, a cough so deep it seemed to rise from somewhere older than their years. They did not walk alone. Behind each master trailed 2, 3, sometimes 5 boys, the smallest holding the brushes, the older ones bent under the weight of sacks filled with soot, scraped from yesterday's work. Their figures blurred into the grey of the streets, indistinguishable from one another, as if the city itself had carved them into sameness. Life for these children rarely began with choice. Many were sold, handed over by parents whose hunger left them with nothing else to give. A shilling here, a promise there. Enough to quiet the shame of letting a child go. Enough to believe that work, however cruel, was better than starvation. Others came from orphanages, workhouses, the endless supply of forgotten children who had no names worth keeping. For them, the master's word was law, and the flue became their home. To step inside a chimney was to enter a world apart from the city streets. The outside world, wide and noisy, disappeared the moment a child pressed himself into that narrow throat of brick. Inside, there was only closeness, the scrape of knees against soot, the press of elbows against walls, the air so thin that each breath felt stolen. Darkness swallowed everything. The only light was memory, the faint image of the street just before the climb, and even that faded with each upward push. The children became creatures of that darkness. Their movements were slow, careful, born of necessity, a wrong twist, a moment of panic, and the flue could claim them, stuck fast, unable to move forward or back, their voices muffled by soot, unheard by the world above. Many learned quickly to breathe shallowly, to keep their lungs from filling too fast, to silence the instinct to cough, because coughing meant wasting breath. The flue did not care for names. It scraped the skin from the shoulders, it tore at the knees, it carved lines into flesh that never fully healed. Each child carried the marks of their work long after they had climbed down, scars across their arms, soot etched into the lines of their skin. They were children, yes, but the chimneys shaped them into something older, something worn. At times, the climb demanded stillness, a narrow bend, a sharp turn in the flue, and the child had to pause, twisting his body into shapes that no bone should hold. The silence in those moments was overwhelming, broken only by the sound of their own heartbeat echoing in the tightness of the walls. And then, slowly, carefully, another push upward, another inch gained, until daylight finally appeared, a faint circle far above like the promise of air. Reaching the top was not triumph, only relief. Hands blackened with soot gripped the edge of the chimney, pulling a body out into the grey light of London. The child would cough then, violently, spilling out the ash that had coated his throat, blinking against the sting in his eyes. But even here, upon the roof, the work was not done. Brushes scraped along the edges. Sacks filled again. Soot poured into the city as if the children themselves were the carriers of its darkness. From below, those who passed on the street rarely looked up. They did not see the blackened figures crouched against the skyline, moving like shadows between rooftops. To them, the work was invisible, just as the children themselves were invisible, their labor hidden inside the walls of houses, their suffering swallowed by brick and mortar. And yet, among themselves, the sweeps found something like a family, not the kind that offered comfort, but the kind born of survival. They shared scraps of bread when they could. They carried each other's tools. They pressed close on cold nights in cellars that smelled of damp earth. Older boys showed the younger ones how to twist their shoulders, how to angle their elbows, how to hold their breath at the sharpest bends. In a world that offered them little, this passing of knowledge was the closest thing to care. Still, the cost was unrelenting. Coughs deepened into wheezes. Skin broke down under constant scraping. Some children, too small to climb when first sold, were starved deliberately by masters until their bodies could fit. And those who became too large were cast aside, replaced by others even younger, the cycle repeating endlessly in the city's hunger for clean chimneys and warm fires. They were children, but the city did not see them as such. It saw them as tools, extensions of the broom, instruments that could reach where wood and bristles could not. The flue was their world, and in that world, childhood was something left behind the moment they first crawled upward into the darkness. The children of the flue lived in silence, in smoke, in spaces too narrow for light. They lived in corners where air grew thin, where the body bent against the will of stone. They lived in the coughs that followed them through the streets, in the soot that clung even after washing, in the weight of exhaustion that pulled their heads down at the end of every day. And the city, vast and unfeeling, woke each morning to its fires without ever noticing them. These small blackened figures who vanished into chimneys and returned only when the work was done. The children who climbed into the flues did not begin their lives there. They were placed, passed, traded, as though their bodies were nothing more than goods on a ledger. The city's hunger for clean chimneys carved out a strange marketplace, one where childhood itself was a commodity, measured in shillings and promises that rarely held. There was no need for contracts or papers. The arrangement was simple enough. A master sweep needed small bodies. Parents needed bread. In the shadows of workhouses and crowded alleys, hands were shaken, coins exchanged, and children led away. Some cried, others went silently, their faces dulled by hunger that had already emptied them of protest. It was not the language of choice, but of survival. And in that language, the child was always the lesser weight. For many, it began at the door of the workhouse. These were places where the poor sought relief, but relief came with a price. Families who entered did so under the eye of officials who believed poverty itself was a failing. Fathers, if they remained, were set to hard labor. Mothers were sent to sewing rooms or laundries where their fingers bled over cloth. And the children, the youngest, the smallest, were considered burdens unless they could be made useful. When a sweep arrived at the door, it was easy enough to hand them over. One less mouth to feed, one more penny in the hand, one more promise that perhaps the child would learn a trade. But the trade they learned was not one that led to a craft, nor to independence. It led into the chimneys, into darkness, into the endless scraping of soot. They were bought not for their minds, but for their size. A thin frame meant profit. A bony shoulder meant usefulness. And so the transaction was not of future, but of flesh, measured in how narrow a child could make himself against brick. There were streets where this business was open, though never named as such. A sweep might linger near markets, waiting for desperate parents. He would look over the children the way a horse trader might inspect a colt, checking shoulders, asking ages, pressing coins into a calloused hand. A boy of 6 or 7 was worth little, for he was not yet strong enough to climb high. But at 8, 9, 10, his value sharpened. The younger the better, some said, for smaller meant deeper climbs, tighter bends, flues where even thin brushes could not pass. The parents rarely lingered after the bargain. Some looked away, ashamed. Others hardened themselves, convincing their hearts that a working child was better than a starving one. The sweep, in turn, spoke of bread, of shelter, of apprenticeship, though his promises were smoke themselves, fading as soon as the child stepped into his world. What was truly promised was hunger, soot, and the slow shaping of the body to fit the city's dirtiest needs. And for those who had no parents left, the selling was easier still. The streets of London were full of orphans, children who begged by day and slept beneath bridges at night. Their presence was a constant shadow, small voices asking for a crust, small hands reaching for warmth. A sweep needed only to find them, to offer not comfort but command, and the children followed, because following meant at least an end to the cold. They were not so much bought as gathered, absorbed into a system that saw no difference between voluntary and forced when hunger pressed against the ribs. The masters who bought them were not all cruel in the same way. Some were harsh, their tempers sharp, their canes sharper. Others kept their discipline quieter, letting neglect rather than blows do the work. But whether shouted at or ignored, beaten or merely worked, the result was the same. The child belonged to soot. Their bodies were shaped by the chimneys, their lives bent around the master's need for profit. Those who spoke of reform called it slavery in all but name. And though the word was debated in parlours and pamphlets, the children themselves felt no need for such arguments. They knew, in the rawness of their skin and the emptiness of their bellies, that they were possessions before they were people. A tool in a box, a coin in a purse, a shadow that could be replaced when it grew too tall to crawl. The nights revealed this truth most clearly. After the day's climbs, after the soot was shaken from clothes and collected in sacks, the children were herded into corners of basements or sheds. There they lay on straw, their breaths shallow, their coughs filling the silence. Some whispered of mothers they remembered faintly, of streets where they once played, of meals that felt like dreams. Others said nothing at all, curling into themselves with the stillness of those who had learned that hope was dangerous. The masters, meanwhile, counted their earnings. Each flue cleared, each chimney brushed, each sack of soot sold to farmers for spreading on fields. All of it translated into coin, none of it into care. The children saw only scraps, crusts of bread, mugs of weak ale, enough to keep them climbing, never enough to give them strength. To the city, soot was wealth. To the children, it was the price of being alive. Sometimes the transactions began even earlier than a boy's first climb. Masters starved them deliberately, keeping their bodies small enough to fit the narrowest shafts. Bread was rationed not by hunger, but by necessity. Just enough to keep legs moving, never enough to add flesh. A boy who grew too quickly was useless, and uselessness had no place in this trade. In such cases, a child might find himself dismissed, replaced by one even younger, even thinner, while his own future dissolved into the same streets he had been taken from. This cycle, buying, using, discarding, fed itself endlessly, hidden within the everyday life of the city. For every child who grew too tall, there was another sold in his place. For every cough that deepened into silence, another voice was pressed into service. The masters rarely wanted for labor, because poverty never slept and hunger never rested. It is difficult to imagine what it meant to be valued only for the space your body could crawl through, to know that your worth was measured in soot scraped from brick, that your name mattered less than the bend of your back, to stand in a line of boys, waiting as a master's eyes passed over you, deciding whether you were small enough, light enough, thin enough to be useful. The shame of being sold was sharp, but it dulled quickly under the weight of survival. Hunger made almost anything tolerable, almost. And so children were bought and sold not once, but over and over, passed between masters when debts came due, traded when neighborhoods shifted, exchanged as though they were tools to be sharpened or worn down. Some boys forgot the faces of those who had given them up. Others remembered too clearly, carrying the image of a parent's back turned away, of hands that pushed them forward toward the sweep. The city carried on above it all. Fires burned in hearths, families gathered around their warmth. Soot drifted upward into chimneys, and children crawled to clear it. Beneath the clatter of hooves, the cries of merchants, the tolling of bells, this other commerce thrived in silence. A commerce not of goods, but of lives, where a child was reduced to ash before he had even lived enough to grow, bought and sold. This was the beginning for so many, the first step into a life where ownership outweighed innocence. They were traded in the same way soot itself was traded, a byproduct of fire that the city had no use for, except as something spread thin, something scattered, something to vanish into the soil. And so, the children became part of that same economy of ash. They were gathered, shaped, used, and forgotten, swept away by the city's hunger for warmth, its endless appetite for smoke. The first taste of morning was not bread nor milk, nor anything that could comfort a body waking from uneasy sleep. It was soot, fine, bitter, and inescapable, clinging to lips before the eyes had even adjusted to the dim light that crept through broken shutters. It lay in the air like a second skin, coating straw mattresses, settling in cracks of floorboards, mixing with the damp so that every breath carried it down into the chest. To be a sweep was to begin each day already marked by ash, as if the city itself had crawled inside you overnight. Rising was no choice, but a command. The master's voice, or sometimes the sharper strike of his cane against the wall, called the children from their nests of rags. They stirred slowly, blinking against the sting in their eyes, rubbing soot from their faces that had never truly left since the day before. Stomachs groaned with hunger, but hunger was not enough to pause the day. A crust of bread, if it appeared at all, was handed out in silence, hard enough to scrape against the teeth, gone in 2 quick bites that left the body wanting more. The morning air outside was no cleaner. Stepping into the streets, the children were greeted by the grey veil of London's dawn, thick with smoke from 1,000 fires kindled in hearths across the city. The smell was sharp and heavy, a mixture of coal and damp wood, curling low between narrow alleys. Fog pressed against the skin, carrying with it particles of soot so fine they lingered on the tongue. Each breath was a swallow of bitterness, each cough a reminder that the city's lungs were not its own, they were the children's. The master walked ahead with his bundle of tools, boots cutting sharp sounds into the cobbles. Behind him, the children followed, their feet dragging their figures small shadows in the pale light. None spoke, for words were wasted when the air itself seemed unwilling to carry them. Instead, there was the sound of coughing, shallow, rattling, persistent, rising and falling like the chorus of an unending song. The first house of the morning was not far. Its brick facade, polished railings, and tall windows gave it the appearance of wealth, though its chimneys betrayed the truth of labour hidden within. The master knocked, exchanged a few low words with the servant at the door, and then gestured sharply. A boy stepped forward, his shoulders tense, his hands gripping the brushes as though they were weapons rather than tools. Inside, the air was warmer, but no kinder. The hearth glowed faintly, its fire reduced to embers after the night. The flue above it heavy with the residue of countless days before. The child knelt, pressing his body close to the opening, the soot already smudging his cheeks before he had begun. He took one shallow breath, coughed it out, then climbed inside, disappearing into the darkness of the chimney's throat. For those left waiting, the morning continued with silence. The crackle of firewood, the distant clatter of pans from the kitchen, the muffled sound of the city outside, all of it seemed far away compared to the thought of the boy pressing upward through the flue. They imagined his elbows scraping brick, his knees grinding against stone, his chest tightening as the air thinned. They knew the taste he carried in his mouth even now, soot falling like powder onto his tongue, bitter and metallic, sticking to the roof of the mouth where no amount of spitting could dislodge it. When he re-emerged, black from head to toe, eyes watering, cough rattling through his thin frame, the master gave a curt nod. Another child was pushed forward. Another climb began. The morning stretched on in this rhythm. Soot, cough, silence, soot again, until the body lost count of how many chimneys had been crawled through, how many hearths had been scraped clean. To last even an hour was a test. The soot clung to the skin, wormed into the hair, filled the space beneath fingernails. It gathered in the folds of clothing, so that each movement released a small cloud that settled again in the lungs. Water was rare, washing rarer still. The children grew used to carrying that blackness on their bodies, inside their bodies, as though they themselves were extensions of the flue. At times, the work brought them onto rooftops. Here, the air was no freer. Smoke drifted upward in thick plumes, wrapping around them until their throats closed tight. From above, the city stretched in endless grey, chimneys jutting like teeth against the sky. Each one promised more work, more crawling, more soot. Even the wind carried no relief. It only shifted the smoke so that it blew into their faces. burning the eyes until tears cut small clean lines down their cheeks. The master measured the morning not by the children's weariness, but by the number of houses crossed off his list. His steps were brisk, his commands short, his patience thin. A cough too long, a climb too slow, and the cane reminded the child that there was no room for hesitation. The children obeyed not from respect, but from fear. Fear of the strike, fear of the hunger that came when they displeased him, fear of being discarded as useless if their bodies failed. And yet, for all their obedience, there was no praise. The work was invisible once it was done. Families gathered by their hearths again in the evenings, warming themselves by clean flames, unaware of the soot-filled mouths that had made it possible. The children left behind nothing but coughs echoing in alleys, soot footprints fading into the mud, and a hunger that deepened with each passing day. As the morning wore on, exhaustion crept in, knees buckled slightly with each step, shoulders sagged beneath the weight of brushes, breaths came shorter, raspier, like bellows losing their force. Still, the soot clung. It pressed into every pore, clung to every tooth, tasted of iron and bitterness. To eat bread at midday was to eat it with soot. To drink water was to swallow soot. Even sleep, when it finally came at night, was filled with the taste of soot carried into dreams. This was the rhythm of mornings for the chimney sweeps, a hunger that never ended, a cough that never healed, and a tongue that never knew anything but the bitterness of ash. To imagine yourself in their place is to imagine waking not to comfort, not to warmth, but to the sharp reminder that even the first breath of the day belonged to the chimney, to the soot, to the city that consumed you before you had even begun to live. And still, the day was only half begun. The streets are only just beginning to stir when the boy is summoned. His body is still heavy with the last scraps of sleep, though the morning air has already lost its freshness, dulled by the soot that never quite leaves. A master's call is enough to scatter any thoughts of lingering. Bare feet, raw from cobbles, find their way to the waiting ladder. The tool bag, too heavy for his size, is thrust into his arms. Then comes the flue itself, its opening a gaping black mouth against the brick, breathing out a stale warmth of smoke and damp. It does not look like a place meant for a child, though it has been shaped into one. The brickwork narrows at odd angles, twists upward like a cruel puzzle, and presses tight where it was never meant for human passage. Yet into this blackness the boy must go. His small fingers, calloused though not yet strong, grip the edge of the opening. He tastes soot before he has even entered. It sticks to his lips and tongue, falls down his throat in a slow, dry trickle. The master's voice behind him carries no patience. "Up you go, lad." The words are not cruel in tone, but cold in indifference. The boy wriggles forward, body folding itself unnaturally as he pushes into the flue. The light of morning disappears within the first few feet. The chimney swallows him whole. Inside, the darkness is not complete silence. Every scrape of brick against bone, every faint crackle of ash falling, every shallow breath seems magnified. The flue holds its own sounds too. The faint settling of soot disturbed, the creak of timbers above, the muted beat of life carrying on outside. None of it matters here. For the boy, there is only the crawl upward. The brick is cold at first, but quickly rough warmth rises from the soot-coated walls. His knees slide against the surface, skin opening to small cuts that burn instantly. Elbows tuck in tight, fingers claw their way into the smallest crevices, finding what grip they can. He moves like an insect pressed flat against stone, except slower, because every inch demands breath held and breath given, as if the chimney decides how much air will be allowed. The blackness closes around him. The child cannot see his own hand if he lifts it, cannot tell whether the flue is widening or narrowing until his body tells him so. Sometimes it presses against his chest, ribs squeezed as if the brick itself has no intention of letting him go further. He twists sideways, shoulder grinding into mortar to find the space to keep climbing. At other points, the chimney suddenly opens wider, but only enough to remind him of what it feels like to fall. His body stiffens, legs pushing hard against the wall, until the weight of his own fear pins him there. There is no pause allowed. The soot thickens the higher he goes. Each movement shakes down a rain of black dust. It enters his mouth even when closed, finds his eyes until they sting with water, clogs the nose until breath becomes shallow and wheezing. His chest rattles with coughs that he dares not give voice to, for coughing in such a space steals the strength needed to hold on. And still he climbs, inch by inch. What does a child think in such a space? Not of freedom, not of rescue. Those words belong to another world, one that passes overhead in smoke and sunlight he cannot see. Here the thoughts are smaller, reduced to what the body knows. Another breath, another push of the knee, another scrape of fingers finding their hold. There is no room for anything larger. Sometimes, though, fear gives shape to imagination. The blackness feels alive. In the silence of soot and breath, it seems the chimney might close of its own will, or that the walls themselves are listening. A boy who has climbed enough flues learns to press such thoughts deep down, but they never vanish entirely. Each climb is its own descent into something that feels older and darker than brick. The master waits outside. He knows the path of this flue, though not every turn. The child is expected to find the way, to press upward where the brush cannot go, to loosen the soot that has clung stubbornly since the last fire. Above, the hearth waits to breathe again, clean enough for flame. But the boy does not think of that. He thinks only of not stopping, for stopping here means being swallowed whole. Midway through, the walls narrow so sharply that his small body can scarcely move. The flue was never meant to bend in such a way, yet time and careless builders have made it so. His ribs press into brick, his back arched unnaturally. He exhales deeply, shrinking himself for just a moment, and slides one shoulder forward. Pain flares sharp as brick scrapes away thin skin. The soot clings thicker here, undisturbed for too long. It enters his lungs in a sudden rush. He coughs, body convulsing, and for a moment he cannot move. The walls press closer, the darkness heavier. He must force himself still, swallow the panic, and then inch forward again. When at last the passage widens, it is not relief he feels, but exhaustion. His arms tremble as he pushes upward. His knees, already raw, find no comfort in the shifting angles of brick. He has long since stopped noticing the blood. It mixes with soot until both feel the same. Only the weight in his chest, the heaviness of air that no longer carries freshness, reminds him that he is still inside, that there is still further to go. Every climb is a measure of endurance. An adult body could not fit. That is the point. Children are chosen precisely because their smallness allows such tasks. But smallness is no advantage when the flue twists in ways that even a child must force himself through. Many do not speak of it, but the blackness has claimed others before. Bodies too weak to keep moving, lungs too choked to take another breath. Sometimes it is not the chimney's design, but a simple slip, a loosened grip, a fall into the darkness below. Masters do not dwell on such stories. There are always more children waiting to be bought. The boy does not know these stories in full, but he feels them in his bones. Each upward crawl is edged with the knowledge that he may not reach the top. Yet he keeps moving, for there is no other choice. His world is narrowed to brick, soot, and the next small motion. At last, faintly, a draft of cooler air brushes across his cheek. It is weak, but to lungs that have known only soot, it feels almost sharp. He cannot see the light yet, but the air itself tells him that the opening is near. His limbs, near collapse, summon the strength for the final push. Fingers claw at mortar, knees drive upward, shoulders twist once more through two narrow angles. Then, with one last heave, his head breaks into faint daylight. He emerges slowly, face first, streaked with black, eyes streaming. His small body hauls itself onto the rooftop, trembling, coughing into the morning air. The city stretches around him, rows of rooftops, chimneys smoking, the hum of life below. It is not freedom, not escape. It is simply another part of the work. He knows he must still descend, knows there will be another chimney waiting. But for a moment, he feels the strange chill of the open sky, and it tastes different from soot. The master calls from below, voice carrying upward. The boy coughs one last time, rubs soot from his eyes with the back of a raw hand, and prepares to climb down. The blackness behind him still clings to his lungs, and it will not leave, not ever. The chimney does not forget those who pass through it. It marks them, inside and out. And so the day moves on, the city still breathing smoke, the child still part of its endless labor. The flue waits for the next body, the next crawl, the next life, pressed into its narrow darkness. The rooftop air does not linger long on the boy's lips. It is sharp at first, almost cleansing, but its taste fades as quickly as it came. He coughs until his ribs ache, then steadies himself against the chimney stack, waiting for the world to stop spinning. Below, the master's voice cuts through the morning hum, calling him down. His small body obeys, hands and feet moving on instinct alone, until the soot-streaked child is back on the ground where he began. The master does not pause to ask if he can continue. There is no room in this trade for such questions. Another flue waits, another climb through blackness that promises only scraped skin and ash-filled lungs. The boy swallows hard, though his throat is already raw, and looks toward the next house. Its chimney stands tall and narrow, leaning slightly, as if tired of its own weight. The opening yawns low, a black slit against brickwork damp from last night's rain. The boy's knees buckle at the thought of entering again so soon, but no hesitation is allowed. The brush and scraper are set aside, tools too large for what lies ahead. This passage was built in a time when builders shaped chimneys, not for ease, but for the whim of design, winding in angles sharp enough to catch even the smallest frame. He crouches at the base, fingers trembling as they trace the rim of the flue. The soot is damp, clumped into paste that smears his skin. The smell is different here, less of smoke and more of mildew, a sour dampness that clings. He presses himself into the opening, shoulders tight, head bent forward. The master nods once, not in approval but in expectation. Then the boy disappears into the dark once more. The crawl begins slower this time. His limbs feel heavier than before, each movement tugging at muscles already raw. The chimney narrows almost immediately, forcing him onto elbows and knees. His chest rubs against brick, his spine bent into a curve that makes breathing shallow. The soot is wetter here, sticking in clumps to his arms and cheeks. Every scrape leaves behind not just dirt, but a smear that burns against open cuts. Air grows scarce in such places. The chimney does not breathe easily. It hoards its drafts and offers little. The boy draws in shallow gasps that taste more of ash than oxygen. The air feels thick, as though each breath must be chewed before it can be swallowed. His lungs strain, wheezing with effort. He pushes upward, knees slipping against slick mortar, until the narrowness becomes suffocating. The flue bends sharply, forcing him sideways. He flattens himself as best he can, ribs scraping, shoulder grinding, until he feels skin tear. The pain is sharp, but the lack of air dulls everything else. His chest heaves in short bursts. A deep breath is impossible here. The space will not allow it. The blackness feels thicker than before, not just absence of light, but something that presses close, like heavy cloth over the face. The boy's mind grows hazy. He blinks, though it makes no difference in the dark. He wills his body forward, inch by inch, knowing that to stop is to surrender. He coughs once, and the sound is swallowed instantly, trapped within the chimney's throat. The vibration shakes loose more soot, which falls into his eyes and mouth. He chokes, twisting awkwardly to clear his throat, but there is nowhere to turn. The flue claims what little air remains, leaving him desperate. Children like him are told to keep moving, no matter what. The master's voice echoes in memory, not kind, not cruel, simply matter of fact. Air's always up top. Don't stop till you find it. The boy clings to the thought, though his body protests. His fingers claw at the brick, nails splitting as he drags himself upward. His knees, blistered and bleeding, slide again and again until each motion feels like fire. The chimney narrows further still, pressing so tightly that his chest cannot expand fully. Breathing becomes a shallow trickle, barely enough to sustain. He exhales longer than he inhales, forcing his body smaller, then wriggles forward by instinct. His ribs grind against the brick, each breath a negotiation. His heart pounds fast, echoing in his ears louder than any sound outside. Moments blur. The climb becomes dreamlike, as though he is floating inside a black tide. The air is so thin now that his thoughts scatter. He sees nothing, hears nothing but the rasp of his own breath. Panic threatens to rise, but even fear needs more air than this space will give. The soot shifts beneath him, disturbed by his crawling. It cascades downward in small showers, filling the air with thicker clouds. He breathes them in because there is nothing else to breathe. The particles coat his throat, dry and burning, until coughing feels like swallowing knives. His chest convulses, pressing harder against the walls, and he fears he will become lodged here forever, another body swallowed by the black. Yet survival is stubborn. His body moves without permission, dragging itself upward by memory alone. Fingers find cracks, knees push, ribs compress. Breath scrapes in and out. He loses all sense of distance. It could be a few feet or 100. The flue twists again, then straightens, then narrows. Each shift feels endless. At last, faintly, the air changes. It is not fresher, not clean, but different, less stale, less heavy. His starved lungs recognize it before his mind does. He lifts his head as much as the space allows and drags his body forward with renewed desperation. The air is still thin, but enough to keep him conscious, enough to promise that the top cannot be too far. His body shudders as he climbs the final stretch. Muscles tremble with exhaustion, vision blurs, but instinct drives him on. A draft whispers down from above, cool against his face. He gasps for it, choking on soot but finding strength in the hint of air. His fingers grip rough mortar one last time, and he pulls himself higher. Then suddenly, the flue widens into a pocket where he can almost sit upright. The air here is no clearer, but there is more of it, enough to breathe without suffocating. He collapses against the wall, chest heaving, soot cascading down around him. His face is blackened, his eyes red, his lips cracked. Yet he is alive, and the chimney has not taken him this time. Outside, the city carries on as if nothing has happened. Fires are lit, smoke drifts skyward, streets fill with footsteps and wheels. No one looks upward to wonder about the child swallowed inside the flues. He is part of the machinery now, a small moving piece within the greater engine of soot and fire. He cannot linger long. The master waits, and the chimney is not yet clean. He forces himself upright again, brushing soot from his eyes. The crawl must continue until the brush can reach, until the hearth below is cleared for flame. His lungs rattle, each breath shallow, but he pushes onward. The flue stretches higher still, and the air, though less heavy here, is still not generous. It demands more of him with every inch. The child's body, fragile as it is, carries him upward. The crawl is not yet finished. Somewhere above, the rooftop waits, and with it another fleeting taste of sky. But for now, the chimney holds him in its grip, the darkness pressing close, the air thinning once more. The air pocket offers no comfort for long. It is a pause, nothing more. A shallow hollow within the flue where a child might draw breath before the climb demands more. The soot clings heavier here, stirred loose by his trembling frame, coating his lips until they taste of iron. His hands, blistered and raw, grope against the wall, as if the bricks might shift to make way. But the chimney has no mercy. He must keep moving. The passage narrows once again, a cruel tightening, as though the builders themselves had wished to test how small a body could be forced to become. The boy exhales until his chest hollows, then presses onward, shoulder first. The wall scrapes against him with each push. Bone meets brick in a dull, grinding friction. His thin frame bends as far as it can. The sound is not loud, but inside the chimney every movement reverberates. A private music of suffering. His knees draw up beneath him, pressing forward in small jerks. The skin there has already been stripped away in patches, leaving only weeping abrasions. Each new shove drags raw flesh over mortar ridges, cutting deeper until red mingles with black. He feels it in flashes, like sparks, but the soot numbs as much as it wounds. Pain becomes the air he breathes. His elbows catch against jagged edges, bones knocking sharply. Sometimes the joint slips, sliding forward in awkward angles, then jams again where the flue narrows. He must twist, contorting his frame further than it wishes to go. The grinding of bone on brick repeats, steady, rhythmic, until he feels as if he himself is part of the chimney, a moving stone among the still ones. Breath grows shallow again. Each scrape is accompanied by a short exhale, each shift upward by a strained gasp. He cannot fill his lungs completely. The space will not allow it. The thin draft above offers little relief. The soot rains steadily, settling on the moisture of his wounds, grinding into them until they sting like fire. He coughs once, and the movement forces his ribs against the walls. The sharp edges of bone drag along brick, vibrating through his body like the strike of a hammer. Still he climbs. The world outside is distant. Carriages rattle, vendors shout, bells mark the passing of hours. But none of that enters here. The flue is its own world, one of black dust, grinding stone, and the small, persistent sound of a child's body moving where nobody should. Sometimes he imagines he hears whispers in the soot, the voices of those who never made it through, boys who slipped, lodged, suffocated, or simply stopped. He presses forward faster when such thoughts creep in, though his body screams for rest. The chimney does not forgive hesitation. The sharpest passage comes midway. It is a corner where the flue juts suddenly inward, forcing him to press his body sideways, ribs flattened against brick. His shoulder blades grind, bones scraping with each breath. He twists his pelvis, shoving one leg forward while the other trails behind, bent unnaturally. His spine curves painfully, a bow forced tighter and tighter. The brickwork cuts at his hip. His bones are so close to the surface of his skin that it feels as if they will tear through. He pushes harder, teeth clenched, eyes streaming. The soot burns in his tears, leaving streaks down his blackened cheeks. His lips split when he draws them tight, blood mingling with ash. At last he wriggles through, but the flue only rises steeper. His knees press harder against the wall now, bones striking stone with dull thuds. The sound joins the rasp of his breath, the scuff of fingers clawing upward, the rain of soot falling endlessly downward. The skin of his hands gives way again, new cuts, splitting over old ones. His fingers slip but find purchase, slipping again, clinging once more. Nails catch on rough edges until they peel back, raw pink beneath. Pain sparks bright, but the body adapts, presses forward, bleeds quietly in the dark. The boy no longer notices the difference between his own weight and the weight of the chimney pressing in. Both are crushing, both inescapable. He feels smaller with every inch, as though the soot itself eats at him, grinding him down to fit the passage. Then, without warning, his shin strikes a jut of brick. The pain is sharp, bone on stone, reverberating upward into his thigh. He bites back a cry, for sound wastes breath. He shifts his leg, only to strike again. The angle of the flue forces him against it, scraping until skin breaks. He drags himself forward despite it, leaving behind a smear that no one will see, lost in centuries of black. The chimney narrows once more. His ribs compress so tightly that each breath feels stolen. He exhales fully, ribs collapsing inward, then shoves his body through a gap scarcely wider than his own chest. His bones grind audibly against the brick. a muted scraping that seems to echo from within. He groans low, not in defiance, but in surrender, the sound of a body reshaping itself against stone. Every inch is earned through pain. His body is too small to resist, too frail to argue. It must bend, must press onward, or else be swallowed whole. The scrape of bone against brick becomes steady, almost rhythmic, as if he is chiseling himself upward, carving his path with blood and dust. At last, faintly, another draft whispers down. The air is no cleaner, but it carries the suggestion of space, of height gained. His lungs seize the chance, dragging in shallow breaths that burn but sustain. He lifts his head, eyes streaming against falling soot, and pushes again. The walls remain merciless. They will not widen until they choose to, but the boy endures. His body pressed tighter, scraped raw, marked deeper. His small frame is both his curse and his salvation. No grown man could make such a climb. No child should either. Yet here, in the dark, pressed between brick and breath, he has no choice. Above, the rooftops wait unseen. The city smoulders on, smoke rising endlessly. The world does not pause to wonder how many children bleed unseen within its chimneys. The boy does not wonder either. He only climbs, each scrape of bone against brick another mark upon his body, another step toward the sky that offers no mercy, only a fleeting taste of air before the next descent begins. And so the flue consumes him still, the sound of his body against stone etched into its narrow throat. One more passage marked not by tools or brushes, but by a child's fragile bones grinding their way upward in silence. The climb wears on until the body feels more shadow than flesh, more soot than skin. The flue rises above like a narrow throat with no end, and the boy pushes upward because there is nothing else to do. His knees burn, his ribs ache, his fingers throb, but none of it matters in the black silence. He is only movement, pressed into the walls, scraping forward in a world that does not know he exists. Then the chimney shifts. The walls open into a wider chamber, a pocket where soot has gathered for years, waiting for one small frame to disturb it. His hand brushes the edge first, and then the rest follows. A sudden collapse, a silent avalanche of black dust released by his touch. The ash does not fall gently. It crashes downward in a heavy sheet, coating his hair, his shoulders, his eyes. It pours into his mouth before he can close it, choking him with its weight. The taste is bitter and metallic, sharper than the usual soot, as though it has waited decades to descend all at once. He coughs hard, but the coughing only drags more of it in. The air turns thick, no longer breathable, and his body convulses in the struggle to rid itself of what cannot be rid. His eyes stream, stinging with the grit that grinds beneath his eyelids. He rubs them with raw knuckles, only to smear the soot deeper. Darkness remains, not just from the chimney but from the ash that blinds him. The world becomes a blur of black, his breath a ragged rasp. His face, already streaked with soot and blood, is now buried beneath a new mask of ash. The weight of it settles heavy across his nose and mouth. It clogs every passage where air should move freely. He gasps shallowly, desperate for space, but the flue has none to offer. Each inhalation drags in more dust. Each exhale only stirs the cloud around him. The boy cannot tell whether the walls are closer now, or whether it is the ash pressing against him. The chimney feels alive, as though it has chosen this moment to suffocate its intruder. He pushes upward, frantic, but his arms shake too violently. The soot makes the bricks slick, his hands sliding off edges where they should grip. His knees slip too, raw flesh grinding but failing to find purchase. The ash falls still, though less now, the greater mass already settled across his face and chest. It smothers him in silence. The coughs come in fits. Each one shakes his small body violently against the brick. His chest rattles with the effort, but there is no relief. The soot shifts downward again with each spasm, sprinkling fresh handfuls over his lips. He spits, but spitting is useless here. The ash always returns. In the dimness, he feels rather than sees how it coats him. His skin prickles, pores clogged with grit, hair matted thick. Even his ears fill with dust, muting the world further until the only sound is the drumming of his own heartbeat against the narrow walls. There is no time for panic. Panic would cost too much air, and there is none to spare. His body learns quickly. Conserve what is left. Move slowly. Crawl forward as though each inch is a victory. He shuts his eyes tight, trusting touch instead of sight. His fingers, bleeding, feel for mortar, dragging him upward through the choking haze. The soot shifts again, sliding off his shoulders in small avalanches. Each time it falls, it brushes his face with the weight of sand, a suffocating veil that clings even as he tries to brush it aside. His cheeks are scratched raw, his lips split deeper. The black powder settles into every wound, grinding itself into the open skin until the pain flares with each movement. Yet even in this suffocation, the work must continue. The boy is the brush, the scraper, the tool forced where no iron rod can reach. His small body is expected to carry the soot downward, to loosen what clings stubbornly to brick. Each fall of ash marks his success, though no one above or below will thank him for it. The climb resumes in slow jerks. His knees slip but push again. His elbows scrape, bones grinding against stone. His breath rattles thin and shallow, more cough than inhalation. The soot does not leave him. It clings inside as much as out, coating his lungs until they wheeze like bellows filled with sand. Time has no measure here. Minutes, hours, all dissolve into the endless black crawl. The only markers are the falls of soot, the coughs that shake his frame, the trembling of limbs that edge closer to collapse. The chimney is patient. It will take as long as it wishes. The boy has no choice but to endure. At last, the soot grows lighter, not gone, but less thick, less suffocating. He can breathe in fragments again, though each breath still tastes of ash. His eyes open slowly, lashes crusted black, and faint outlines return. The shifting planes of brick, the narrow angles of the flue. The collapse has passed. What remains is only what always remains. The long climb upward. His face burns. The skin there, already raw from earlier climbs, is torn further by grit that grinds into every cut. He feels it when he rubs at his cheeks, the sting sharp and unrelenting. His eyes ache from the scraping of ash beneath the lids, every blink a new wound. But he does not stop. Stopping is not permitted here. The memory of the collapse lingers in his chest, each breath a reminder of what it feels like to drown in soot. It is not water, not liquid, but it suffocates all the same. The body does not care what form drowning takes. The panic is the same. The silence is the same. The only difference is that here, in this black throat of stone, no one will ever see the body float. He moves again, slower than before. Each scrape of bone against brick is careful now, measured, as though any sudden motion might bring another fall. His body trembles, weakened by coughing, but instinct drives him forward. A child does not think of choice. He only thinks of the next inch, the next breath, the next moment when his face might find air instead of ash. Above, faint drafts stir. They are weak, barely noticeable, but enough to guide him. He tilts his face upward, seeking them, forcing his body to climb toward the promise of clearer air. His lungs rattle, the soot inside refusing to leave, but he pushes on. The fall has marked him, etched itself into his chest forever. He will carry the cough long after he escapes this chimney. When at last he pauses, pressing his forehead against the wall, his face leaves behind a black imprint. Soot clings in perfect shape, as though the chimney has taken a mold of him. The image fades almost immediately under new dust, but the mark remains, invisible yet permanent. No child passes through without leaving such ghosts behind. The crawl resumes. The ash still clings, still burns, still suffocates, but the worst of the fall has passed. He has survived it, though survival here means little more than continuing to suffer. His face, once pale beneath the soot, is now invisible beneath the mask of black. He is part of the chimney now, indistinguishable from its walls. Outside, fires roar in hearths. Families gather around warmth, unaware of the child, whose face has been buried beneath a fall of ash, so they may sit in comfort. The soot on their chimney is the soot in his lungs, the dust on their brick, the dust in his wounds. The black that falls on his face is the same black that curls in their air. One sustains the other, and so he climbs still, half blind, half choked, but moving, always moving. The ash has marked him, pressed itself into his skin and blood. He will carry it long after he leaves this flue, long after the day ends. For now, though, the chimney holds him. The soot clings. The face beneath the ash is his, and yet not his. It belongs to the darkness now. The boy's limbs tremble as he drags himself free of the flue. His chest still rattles from the soot swallowed in the crawl, and his eyes sting so fiercely he can barely keep them open. For a moment, he crouches there on the hearth, shoulders heaving, streaked in black from hair to toes. But before he can catch a full breath, a hand seizes him by the collar and hauls him upright. The master has no patience for lingering. A job is not finished until the coin is in his palm, and every child beneath him is only a means to that end. The boy is pushed forward into the room, where the family waits. Their parlour glows with firelight now that the flue is clear. The air smells of wood smoke instead of soot, and laughter fills the space. The boy, coughing black onto his hands, is not seen as part of that comfort. He is only the shadow that delivered it. The master bows stiffly, a gesture rehearsed for years, and extends his hand. The homeowner presses coins into it, the metal clinking softly. The boy notices the sound. It is always the loudest part of any visit. The scrape of shillings exchanged means the difference between food or hunger, between more work or punishment. But none of that clink belongs to him. The master counts quickly, lips moving silently as his fingers test the weight of the money. He does not ask whether the child is injured, whether the climb has scarred him, whether his cough will last through the night. His only concern is the balance of coin. If the payment is short, the master protests loudly. If it is full, he pockets it with a grunt of satisfaction. The boy, meanwhile, wipes soot from his face with the back of his sleeve, though it only smears darker. Outside, the street bustles. Other tradesmen call out their wares, carts rattle by, horses snort against the chill air. Among them, chimney sweeps shuffle along, each group led by a master, each child marked by soot. They move like shadows through the city, unremarkable except for the black trails they leave. The boy glances at them as he follows his master, but there is no comfort in their numbers. Every child carries the same hollow eyes, the same thin frame, the same cough that rattles long after the climb. The master keeps his pace brisk. He walks with the certainty of a man whose belly is filled and whose boots are whole. His hand rests often on the pocket where the coins lie, as though afraid they might vanish. He speaks rarely to the boy, except to bark an order or deliver a cuff for slowing. The child's small steps must match the master's stride, no matter how weary the body. At the next house, the ritual repeats. The boy is thrust forward, made to squeeze into another black throat of brick, scrape and claw, until soot rains down, and then emerge half-blinded, coughing, with new cuts across his skin. Again, the master bows. Again, coins pass. Again, they move on. Each shilling carries a story, though the master never hears it. For him, they are only weight, numbers, the clink of success. For the boy, they are hours of suffocation, days of hunger, nights of coughing. Each coin is bought with scraps of his body, yet he never touches them, never holds even one to feel its edge against his skin. The master's ledger is simple. Children are cheap. A few shillings to a desperate family buys a boy outright. Less if the parents are starving, eager to rid themselves of another mouth. The master offers no kindness, only the promise of employment, of food perhaps. But the truth is harsher. The child becomes property, a body to send where iron brushes cannot fit. Some masters keep their boys in squalid rooms, feeding them crusts of bread and bowls of thin gruel. Others lodge them in stables, among animals and straw, their sleep broken by cold and coughing. The boy in this crawl knows no bed of his own, only the floor where his limbs collapse at day's end. His wages are never handed to him. If he is fed, it is seen as payment enough. The shillings always return to the master's hand. He measures them against the cost of boots, of ale, of the occasional tool, rarely against the cost of a child's life. If one boy grows too sick to climb, another can be bought. If one slips and breaks, the streets are full of replacements. The coin always keeps flowing. And so the child learns early that his worth is not in who he is, but in how much soot he can loosen, how many chimneys he can crawl before collapsing. His name is seldom spoken. The master refers to him as lad, or sometimes nothing at all, just a gesture toward the flue. The boy's body is the tool. His soul, if he has one, is of no account in the master's arithmetic. The city feeds this system endlessly. Every street has chimneys rising like forest trunks, each one demanding to be cleared or else risk fire. Families want warmth, bakers want ovens, factories want furnaces. The demand is constant, and with it the trade. Masters walk like merchants, their boys trailing, each shilling pulled from the soot of another hearth. Occasionally, one sees a master smiling in a tavern, raising a mug heavy with ale bought from a morning's work. The boy may sit outside the door, waiting, cold and tired, while the coins he helped earn are turned into drink. If he is lucky, a crust may be thrown to him. If not, he waits, hungry. The master laughs louder with every swallow, counting shillings again in his head, satisfied with his profit. The boy does not laugh. His throat burns too much for it. He leans against the tavern wall, soot still caked on his cheeks, and listens to the muffled noise of cheer within. To him, the sound is far away, as unreachable as the comfort of a bed or a meal that fills the belly. Sometimes the master speaks of fortune. If enough chimneys are cleared, if enough coins gathered, perhaps he will expand, take more boys, more houses, more profit. He imagines himself as a man of stature, a tradesman of means. Yet even in these dreams, the boys remain faceless. Their bodies are ladders, their lungs bellows. They are counted in numbers only, never in names. And always the coin passes. It passes from householder to master, from master to tavern, from tavern to market. It never passes into the child's hand. He is the source of it, yet he remains untouched by its comfort. His hands remain raw, his boots thin, his belly hollow. The coin he earns cannot buy him warmth, cannot buy him bread, cannot buy him the chance to rest. The boy learns in time not to expect otherwise. He measures the day not in shillings, but in the number of chimneys survived, the number of coughs endured without collapse. His wealth is the breath still in his lungs at nightfall. His fortune is the strength to rise again at dawn. The master counts differently. He stacks his shillings in neat rows. Satisfied with their gleam, he tallies them in his mind. Each coin, proof of labor well exploited. He does not see the boy's cracked lips, the black etched into his skin, the bent frame of his back. Those do not enter the ledger. Pain is invisible in the arithmetic of profit, and so the balance continues. Day after day, the boy climbs, the soot falls, the coin clinks. The master counts, satisfied. One life measures itself in breath, the other in shillings. Both move forward, bound together by the chimney's black throat. Evening comes not as a gift, but as another burden. The master's pockets jingle with the day's collection, and his stride carries him toward a tavern or market stall. The boy follows until directed elsewhere, his small body carrying nothing but the ache of climbs and the black that clings to his skin. When the city grows darker, When the warmth of the households they cleaned fades behind closed doors, there is no bed waiting for him, no hearth of his own. Instead, there is the cellar. The entrance is low and damp, hidden behind the workshop where brushes and rods are stored. The child slips down the steps into a hollow beneath the street, where the stone walls sweat with moisture, and the air carries the smell of earth and rot. Here the boys are kept, gathered together like tools when not in use. The straw scattered across the floor is thin, damp with seepage, and alive with lice. Each boy claims a patch, curling his body into a ball against the cold that seeps through stone. There are no blankets, sometimes a sack, sometimes a ragged coat passed down until it is more whole than cloth. In winter, breath hangs white in the air, but there is no fire. A fire would cost coal, and coal is measured in coin that must not be wasted on those who are seen as coin makers only. The cellar is never truly quiet. Someone coughs always. Deep, rattling sounds that echo against the walls. Small bodies shiver in their sleep, twitching from dreams that are only extensions of the day's suffering. Narrow walls pressing in, the suffocating dark, the scrape of brick against skin. Rats scurry along the edges, bold in their hunger, sometimes gnawing at crumbs near the boys' feet. The children flinch, but do not rise. They have no strength to drive them away. Food, if it comes, is thrown down on a plate, a heel of bread hardened to stone, a bowl of gruel that tastes more of water than oats. Sometimes there is nothing at all, only the memory of what passed the lips of those in the houses above, the roast meat, the pies, the dripping butter. Hunger curls itself around their spines, settling heavy, making bones sharper in the skin. The boy lies awake most nights, his chest tight, soot still lodged deep in his lungs. He listens to the others breathing, short gasps, wheezes, moans, carried even into sleep. In the dark, names are whispered sometimes, fragments of mothers or fathers left behind. Other times, silence wins, as the children learn that longing brings no comfort, only sharper pain. The cellar walls drip steadily. Sometimes the water pools and the straw beneath grows sodden. A child who wakes soaked must simply endure it, shivering until exhaustion drags him under again. The cold is relentless, pressing as close as the bricks in the chimney. It wraps around them, seeping into marrow, gnawing at joints. No matter how tightly the children huddle together, it is never driven out. The boy curls tighter, his knees drawn up, arms tucked beneath his chin. His skin burns where scrapes were opened against the flue, but there is nothing to soothe them. No bandage, no balm, only the slow drying of blood mingled with soot. Infection comes quietly, red lines spreading along scratches, but the master takes no notice unless the child can no longer climb. Then, and only then, will the cellar lose one occupant and gain another, freshly purchased. Above, the city glows with light, spilling from taverns and homes. Men sit by roaring fires, mugs steaming, laughter rolling through heavy doors. The boys in the cellar hear none of it, save the muffled thump of footsteps overhead, the occasional clatter of barrels. Their world remains one of damp stone, straw that never dries, and air that never warms. When sleep does come, it is restless. The boy dreams of climbing still, of flues that close tighter and tighter until his ribs crack. He wakes with a start, coughing until black phlegm splatters the straw. The cough lingers, rattling long after his breath has calmed. Around him, others stir but do not speak. Each one carries the same sickness, and words cannot ease it. Sometimes in the dead of night, one boy whimpers softly, voice breaking with fever. If he burns too long, the others shift away from him, not out of cruelty, but of fear. Fever is a thief. It takes quickly, and the master does not pay for doctors. A body that cannot climb has no value. When a child dies, he is carried out at dawn, his place on the cellar floor left open for another. The work continues. The boy knows this. He has seen straw cleared where another once lay. He has watched the rats scatter at the sudden absence of warmth. He has listened to the silence where once there was coughing. And he has seen no mourning, no prayer, no marker left behind. The cellar swallows the lost without pause. Time passes strangely in the dark. Hours stretch, then collapse. The boy measures night by the sound of bells faintly carried through the street grates, by the shift in light filtering through cracks in the boards above. When grey dawn begins to press at the edges, the master's steps return, heavy on the stairs. He shouts for them to rise. Sleep is never long enough. Bodies uncurl stiff and sore, stretching limbs that never quite recover from the day before. Eyes blink through crusted lashes, still red with soot. There is no washing, no change of clothes. The same rags that grew blacker yesterday are pulled close today. The boys are herded back into the streets, back into the chimneys, carrying the cellar with them in their bones. But for a few moments longer, in the stretch before dawn fully breaks, the boy lies on his patch of straw and feels the weight of the cellar pressing down as heavily as any chimney. It is not just the stone, or the damp, or the cold. It is the knowledge that the night brings no rest, no warmth, no safety, only a pause in the climb, and the promise that tomorrow he will return again, coughing, bleeding, and blackened, to this hollow beneath the city. Nights in the cellar, never warm. They never change. They are as fixed as the soot that stains the boy's lungs, as inevitable as the master's counting of coins. And when sleep finally comes, it is thin, fragile, broken by the coughs of the living and the silence left by the dead. Morning arrives with no gentleness, only the rough call of boots on the cellar steps and the barked command to rise. The children stir, bones aching from damp stone, lungs tight from the black dust that never quite leaves them. The boy pushes himself upright, coughing before he can even stand, his chest folding inward as if it wishes to collapse entirely. The sound rattles through him, low and hollow, dragging from deep within. It is not new. It is the rhythm of his mornings now, the same as it was yesterday, the same as it will be tomorrow. The cough has settled in him like an unwelcome tenant. At first it came only after a climb, when soot clung thickest to his throat. But over time, it refused to depart. Now it wakes with him, walks with him, sleeps beside him. Each breath is shadowed by it. Each laugh, if laughter ever dared escape, would break into it. The cough is constant, a second voice, speaking always of what the lungs endure. The streets outside are alive with vendors shouting, carts clattering, and the smells of fresh bread drifting from shop fronts. Yet for the boy, the world is dimmed. He staggers along behind the master, his chest seizing, his throat raw. The sound he makes is noticed by no one. Coughs are common among the sweet boys, so common that they cease to be remarked upon. To cough is to exist in this trade. To stop coughing altogether is to have ceased existing. The chimneys are no kinder in daylight than they were in darkness. Each climb forces more soot into the lungs. Each scrape along the wall drives more dust down the throat. The boy emerges blackened, eyes watering, and his cough explodes louder, shaking his entire frame. His ribs ache with it. His stomach lurches until bile rises, blackened with flecks of soot. He wipes his mouth with his sleeve, but the master pays it no mind. The only concern is whether the flue is clean enough to please the householder. Inside parlours and kitchens, where fires crackle warmly, families sometimes glance at the boy with faint pity as he hacks into his hands. But the pity lasts no longer than the moment it takes for coins to be counted. The master assures them all is well. Boys cough, he says. It is nothing. And the child is hurried out again before his sickness can stain the comfort of their hearth. Back in the streets, the cough grows heavier. The boy learns to stifle it as best he can, pressing lips tight, swallowing down the urge until he can hide in a corner. But the lungs betray him. The fit comes stronger, doubling him over, hands gripping knees, chest rattling like a hollow drum. Other sweet boys look on without surprise. Their own chests carry the same burden. In the silence of night cellars, the coughing never ceases. It echoes, one boy answering another, until the darkness is filled with a chorus of lungs tearing themselves apart. There is no cure waiting for them. No physician arrives with balm or tincture. A child's body is not considered worth the expense. Soot cough is expected, endured, and allowed to linger until it takes what it will. Some boys carry it for years, each breath whistling like air through broken reeds. Others fall quickly, fever stealing the little strength their bodies hoarded. But none are spared from its grip. The boy feels it deepen as the days pass. It is not only in his throat now, but in his chest, his very bones. Sometimes when he climbs, he feels the rattle before the cough erupts, a warning that his lungs are filling with more than air. At times, blood follows, bright against the black. He wipes it away quickly, for to show it is to risk being deemed useless. And useless boys are discarded as easily as broken brushes. At night, lying on the damp straw, the cough grows sharpest. The air in the cellar is heavy, unmoving, thick with the breath of too many. He wakes often, throat torn raw, gasping until his vision swims. Around him, other boys cough too, the sound overlapping, merging, until it seems the entire room breathes in ragged fragments. None of them speak of it. To name it is to give it weight, and it is heavy enough already. Sometimes he wonders if his lungs remember what clean air feels like. He has faint memories, distant as dreams, of open fields where the wind was light and the sky stretched wide. But those memories are blurred by soot now, blackened at the edges until even the thought of fresh air feels like a story told by someone else. His life has narrowed to smoke and dust, and his lungs have followed. The master notices only when the boy slows. If a fit delays the pace, a cuff to the head reminds him to move faster. The cough is his burden to carry, not the master's. If it grows too heavy, the boy knows the cellar will lose him, and another child will take his place. In this trade, a cough is not an ailment. It is a measurement of time. How many days or weeks remain before the body is worn through? The boy clings to work as long as he can. Each morning, he forces breath into his chest. Though it comes shallow and uneven, he drags his frame into the chimneys, pressing forward even as a black dust settles deeper within. His cough follows, louder each day, shaking him to his core. Yet still he climbs, because to stop is to be left behind. There are moments, brief and fleeting, when he imagines silence. To wake without his chest seizing, to draw a full breath without choking on it, to live without the sound tearing through him. But the thought drifts quickly away. Silence, for a boy like him, comes only once, and it is final. Until then, the cough remains his constant companion. The city does not notice. Fires continue to burn, homes glow with warmth, and the soot is carried away unseen. The masters count their coins, the taverns echo with laughter, and the boys cough in the shadows. Unheard, unseen. The cough belongs to them alone, and it will not leave. The boy curls once more on the straw, ribs aching, throat raw, his body shuddering with another fit. He closes his eyes against the darkness, his chest rattling in time with the others. It is not rest, not peace, but it is what the night allows. And in the silence between coughs, he knows the truth. This sound is his life now, a cough that never leaves, marking every moment until the last. The city stretches on without pause, its streets weaving like veins through a body that never rests. Smoke coils from chimneys in endless spirals, drifting into the grey sky, where no sun dares shine through with clarity. For those who labour in these shadows, the streets are not places of belonging, but corridors of survival. And for the children who sweep the chimneys, they are paths that do not remember them. Each morning begins the same, the sound of cartwheels against cobbles, the cries of vendors hawking bread, fish, or coal. Yet among these voices, there is no call for the sweet boys. They slip between the crowds unnoticed, thin figures in sooted clothes, hands blackened, eyes downcast. They are present, and yet absent, moving bodies that the city does not count, children whose names dissolve in the noise. The boy walks among them, cough still heavy in his chest, each step sending a dull ache through his ribs. He follows the master to the next house, the next chimney, the next climb. His feet trace paths that have become familiar, yet none of these streets feel as though they belong to him. They are simply places he passes through, cobbles that will forget his tread the moment he is gone. On occasion, he watches others claim the streets as their own. Men in coats stride with purpose, their boots polished, their hats pulled low against the fog. Women linger at market stalls, their laughter bright against the gloom. Children of wealth skip across the stones with toys in hand, their mothers calling after them with soft scolds. All of them leave marks upon the world. Footsteps remembered, voices echoed, names spoken aloud. For the sweet boy, there is no such permanence. His presence is fleeting, like soot brushed from a hearth. Sometimes he wonders if he has ever been seen clearly at all. In the moment he emerges from a chimney, black dust clinging to his hair, his face indistinguishable from shadow, he is less boy than smudge. The householder may glance at him, may offer a crust of bread if pity stirs, but rarely is there a name exchanged. He is the sweep, no different from any other child sent into the flues, and when he leaves, there is nothing left to say he was there. The streets do not speak his name, nor do the people. Even his fellow sweet boys, crowded together in the cellar, rarely use more than scraps of nicknames, half-formed and easily forgotten. In a room where coughing fills the silence, names matter little, survival matters more. A boy might vanish overnight, taken by fever or accident, and by morning, the space he left is filled by another. His name lingers only for a breath, then fades, carried away by the city's indifference. The master, counting coins, keeps no record either. To him, the boys are tools, their worth measured in shillings earned, not in letters or syllables. If one tool breaks, another is found. The city has no shortage of desperate children, no shortage of mothers too poor to keep them, no shortage of fathers lost to drink or labor or death. A name is not needed for profit, only small bodies willing to climb. As the boy trudges through the streets, he feels himself dissolving into them. He notices the details others overlook, the cracks between stones where weeds push through, the damp corners where refuse gathers, the faint outlines of horse hooves impressed into mud. He knows these things intimately, for they exist at his level, yet none of them carry his name. If he were to fall one day in these streets, he wonders if even the stones would hold memory of him, or if the next rainfall would wash him away entirely. In the rare moments when he pauses to catch breath, the boy studies the signs above shops, the painted boards declaring tailors, cobblers, butchers, each name carved in wood, each family proud enough to fix their presence onto the street. The letters will remain long after the hands that hung them are gone, but for him there will be no carving, no mark, nothing etched to prove he walked here. His life leaves no inscription. It drifts like soot, settling briefly, then carried off by wind. There are whispers in the city of children who vanish and are never found, of sweet boys who suffocate in chimneys, their bodies stuck like trapped birds. The houses that claim them continue to burn their fires, the soot still swept by another. In time, even the neighbors forget the boy's face. The city folds itself around the absence, smoothing it over as if he had never been, and the streets remain indifferent, the cobblestones carrying other feet without pause. The boy's cough worsens with each passing week, yet still he walks, still he climbs. His body shrinks beneath the weight of work, but no one remarks upon it. He is not a son here, nor a brother, nor a friend. He is labor in motion. When the master shouts, he answers. When the flue needs clearing, he obeys. Outside these small tasks, he ceases to exist in the eyes of the world. At night, as he lies on the straw, he turns the thought over in his mind. What is a name worth if no one speaks it? He can remember faintly the sound of his mother's voice saying his, long ago, when he was smaller, before the master took him. But her voice has blurred now, worn thin by memory. The cellar does not call him by it. The streets certainly do not. And so he wonders if the name itself has begun to fade, worn away like chalk on stone. The city, with its endless soot and smoke, consumes names easily. It thrives on forgetting. Each morning, new cries rise from the market. New faces hurry past. New carriages roll across the stones. The old is pushed aside, and the nameless are buried within it. For a sweet boy, anonymity is not misfortune, but certainty. The only ones who remain are those whose wealth carves their names into ledgers, deeds, and gravestones. The poor vanish silently, leaving nothing but whispers and coughs that soon fade. The boy dreams sometimes that the streets might one day remember him. Perhaps someone will speak of the child who coughed too long, who climbed too high, who worked until he could no longer stand. But such dreams unravel quickly. The truth presses heavier. He will vanish as easily as soot brushed into the wind, and the streets will carry on, indifferent, carrying the weight of countless forgotten names. As he wakes again to another day, another climb, another long walk behind the master, he feels the city pressing against him. Its stones are cold, its walls unmoved, its streets crowded yet empty of care. He moves among them silently, his cough breaking into the air like a reminder that he exists. Yet no one pauses, no one listens. The streets hear him, but they do not answer, and so his steps carry on, one after the other, fading into cobblestones that will not remember him. His life unfolds here, yet the city erases even as it allows him to pass. In the end, the streets will forget his name, just as they have forgotten so many others before him, and all that remains will be the sound of footsteps swallowed by the endless noise of London, leaving no trace behind. The body is a quiet instrument, and hunger is the sound it makes when it is left too long untuned. For the chimney sweep boy, it hums within him always, sometimes as a faint whisper in the belly, sometimes as a hollow ache that bends his back, and sometimes as sharp as knives pressing against the ribs. It is a presence as constant as soot on the skin, a shadow that follows him through every street, every climb, every restless night. Bread is the measure of life, yet bread rarely finds its way into his hands. When it does, it is the crust left too hard to chew by those who can afford better. His fingers turn it over carefully before breaking it into pieces, savoring each fragment, though it does little to quiet the emptiness that grows inside. Hunger lingers even after the meal, as though mocking him with the reminder that one crust cannot mend a body worn down by endless labor. There are mornings when he rises with his stomach twisted tight, the taste of soot still caught in his throat. His first climb comes before his first bite, and often there is no bite at all. He learns to swallow air, to trick the body into believing it has been fed. The master does not feed generously. Food costs money, and money belongs not to the boys, but to the coins he counts at day's end. Hunger, in this way, becomes another tool of control. A starving boy obeys quickly, works longer, climbs faster, because he knows there is no food waiting should he falter. On the streets, food is everywhere, yet nowhere for him. The scent of roasting chestnuts drifts from vendors' stalls, filling the air with warmth that does not belong to him. Bakers pull loaves from ovens, steam rising from their crusts, and the smell clings to the air like a cruel joke. He walks past with hollow eyes, his stomach tightening, yet his hands remain at his sides. To reach for bread without coin is to risk the lash, or the jail, or worse. Hunger teaches patience, but patience never fills the gut. Other children fare no better. In the dim cellars where they gather at night, hunger sits among them like a silent guest. Boys curl around their stomachs, coughing into their arms, sharing scraps when they can, but never enough to satisfy. They speak little of food, for the very thought of it makes the absence sharper. Instead, they sleep with hunger curled inside, waiting to rise with them in the morning. It is a companion they never escape. The city is not kind to the poor, and least of all to the small. Markets overflow with produce, carts laden with meat, barrels brimming with fish, yet the abundance belongs to others. A sweet boy sees it all as if through glass, near enough to touch, but always beyond reach. He learns to notice the discarded, the cabbage leaves dropped in mud, the apple cores tossed aside, the bones left with traces of meat clinging stubbornly. These, when gathered, are small victories, though they do little to silence the growl of the stomach. Hunger is not only physical, it begins to shape the mind, gnawing at thoughts until every idea bends back to food. The boy dreams of it at night, tables spread with roasts, pies steaming, mugs of warm milk. Yet the dreams dissolve each morning when he wakes to cold air and empty hands. The contrast stings, for the hunger is real, but the feast was never more than a trick of sleep. Work makes hunger heavier. Each climb up the narrow flues pulls at his muscles, demands more than his thin body can give. Sweat stings his eyes, soot clogs his lungs, and his heart beats fast with the strain. But his belly remains hollow, offering nothing back. The body consumes itself in these moments, burning whatever it can find within. He feels it in his bones, in the trembling of his arms, in the weakness that creeps into his legs. Hunger is not simply discomfort, it is decay, slow and relentless. He notices how hunger marks the faces of the boys around him. Cheeks drawn tight, eyes too large in their sockets, lips cracked from dryness. Their bodies seem older and younger all at once, worn down by labor, yet stunted by lack of nourishment. It is hard to measure time in such conditions. A boy of 12 may look no older than 8, his growth halted by years of empty stomachs. Hunger robs them not only of strength, but of years that might have been. In rare moments of fortune, a kind stranger may drop a penny in his hand or offer a heel of bread out of pity. The taste in these moments is overwhelming, a reminder of what food should be, though it lasts only seconds before the emptiness returns. Gratitude mixes with shame, for to beg is to declare openly the hunger that gnaws always inside. Yet there is no choice. Pride cannot feed a boy whose body demands fuel he does not have. Winter deepens hunger most of all. Cold burns through thin rags, and the body requires warmth it cannot create without sustenance. Boys huddle together in corners, pressing close to steal what little heat they can, their stomachs clenching tighter each night. Illness follows swiftly in such seasons, for the body weak from hunger cannot fight the sickness that spreads through damp cellars. A cough worsens, a fever rises, and soon another boy is gone. Hunger clears the space beside him, but it does not leave the room. It lingers, waiting for the next. The master does not weep for these losses. To him, hunger is a small price to pay for cheap labor. There is always another child to take the place of one lost, another desperate family willing to surrender a son for coin. And so the cycle continues. The boys fed just enough to move, never enough to thrive. Their lives consumed as steadily as the coal in the grates they clean. The boy walks on, stomach empty, body light as if hollowed from within. The streets offer no comfort, the air itself heavy with the scent of food he cannot touch. His hunger is not an accident, not a passing misfortune, but a condition of his existence. It shapes his world, dictates his pace, bends his spirit towards survival alone. To live as a chimney sweep is to live always on the edge of starvation. It is to know that food is a privilege, not a certainty. It is to understand that hunger is not merely an absence, but a presence. An endless companion that sits at your side through every climb, every cough, every weary step home. And so the boy continues, with hunger nestled deep inside him, as familiar as breath, as constant as shadow. It will never leave him. It will follow until the day his body cannot walk another street, cannot climb another flue, cannot fight another night of cold. Hunger, faithful and patient, will remain until it consumes him entirely. as it has consumed countless forgotten children before. Sunday does not arrive like a gift. It drifts in quietly, almost unwilling, a softer echo against the clamour of the week. For the sweet boy, it is not a day of transformation, but of pause. A day when soot clings to him still, but the chimneys remain untouched. The city itself seems to exhale faintly, as though for a moment the endless labour is eased, though never undone. The bells mark the morning, their chimes rising above the rooftops, cutting through fog and smoke. They do not ring for him. They call to the faithful who step into churches in their best coats, who bow their heads in polished pews. For the sweet boy, the sound is only reminder that the world moves differently for others. He listens as he lies curled on straw, the chimes filling the cold cellar like water in a cracked basin, spilling out again through the broken air. Sunday brings no feast, no abundance. The master may toss an extra crust if the mood strikes, but more often it is the same thin scrap, the same hunger carried over from the days before. Yet there is a difference. The body rests. The arms do not strain against brick. The knees do not grind against narrow flues. For a few hours, pain does not deepen. It merely lingers, waiting. The streets change too. Where once cries of vendors and the grind of cartwheels filled the air, there is now a hush broken only by the shuffle of feet heading to chapels, by the rustle of pages in prayer books. The boy walks among them sometimes, trailing at the edges, his soot-marked face standing out against the polished shoes and brush coats. He feels the eyes upon him, not with recognition, but with discomfort, an intruder in a day meant for cleanliness of soul. In the churches, voices rise together, filling high ceilings with hymns. He does not join them. He listens from the doorway, or sometimes from the shadows of the street outside. The words are not for him, nor the warmth of the candles, nor the bread and wine that pass from hand to hand. His world remains on the threshold, watching but never welcomed in. Yet the sound itself carries something, a strange comfort, like a lullaby sung for someone else, but overheard by accident. The day passes slowly, as if time itself has decided to stretch. Boys gather in corners, their coughs quieter without soot stirred in their lungs. Some trade stories, though most have little to tell beyond labour and hunger. Others sleep, catching hours denied to them in the week, their small bodies curled like animals seeking warmth. The cellar, though always damp, feels less cruel when the weight of tomorrow does not press quite so close. For a sweet boy, rest is not restoration. It does not mend the cracks in bone or the rasp in breath. It is only suspension, a brief stillness before motion begins again. The sores on knees do not heal in a day. The hollow stomach does not fill with one crust. But there is a kind of relief in knowing the climb will not come today, that the narrow flues will not scrape his skin, that the soot will not choke him deeper. A reprieve, thin and temporary, but still a reprieve. The boy sometimes wonders if this is what the word mercy means, not the granting of plenty, but the granting of less suffering for a single day. He does not question it aloud. Words like that belong to sermons, not to him. Yet the thought drifts through as he listens to bells ring again in the afternoon, their tones carrying across streets that seem cleaner simply because fewer boots strike them. Others find their way into small joys. A scrap of song, whistled softly, a game played with chalk marks on stone, a piece of string twisted into knots for no purpose but passing time. The boy watches, sometimes joins, though the weight of exhaustion often keeps him still. Joy here is fragile, easily broken, but it flickers like a candle stubborn against draughts. For one day, there is no shouting from the master, no scramble-up flues, no soot pressing against the throat. Evening draws in with a slower hand. The sky darkens, the bells sound once more, and the city settles back into its endless rhythm. Yet Sunday has left its trace. For a moment, the boy has felt what it is to stop, if only briefly. The silence of rest carves itself into memory, even as hunger persists, even as cold remains. He clings to it in the same way he clings to crumbs of bread, not enough to sustain, but enough to remind him what it means to feel something other than pain. Still, the truth waits, heavy as ever. The bells will fade, the cellar will sink again into coughing and restless sleep, and morning will come with its summons. The pause will end, and the climb will begin again. But tonight, in the faint stillness that lingers after the last chime, the boy lets his eyes close. The world has not grown kinder. It has not given him food, nor warmth, nor freedom. Yet it has given him this, a brief rest carried on the sound of Sunday bells, fragile as smoke, fleeting as ash. And for now, that is enough to drift into sleep, knowing tomorrow will strip it away, but tonight it is his. The body was never meant to endure such weight so young. Bones still soft from childhood are pressed into service long before they have learned their full strength. The narrow shoulders of the Chimney sweet boy carry burdens meant for men, and yet his size is the very reason he is chosen. What is a blessing for the master? The smallness that allows him to crawl where no grown body could fit becomes a curse for the child himself. His body bends to the chimneys, twists to their angles, bruises against their brick. In time, it begins to resemble them, thin, worn, blackened, fragile. Each climb etches its mark. Knees scraped raw form scars upon scars. Elbows pressed into corners grow calloused, though never strong enough to resist the stone's bite. Fingers claw against mortar, nails cracked and blackened, knuckles swollen from countless collisions with unyielding walls. The child's body does not grow with freedom, but with damage. Growth is stunted, not nurtured. There are boys of 12 who could pass for 6, their frames so slight they resemble shadows more than children. Hunger shrinks them further. The meager crusts that pass for meals cannot sustain the furious energy demanded by hours of climbing, brushing, crawling through soot. The body consumes itself, burning its reserves until nothing remains but bone wrapped in thin skin. Illness is constant. The lungs, still tender, fill with dust that never leaves. Coughs tear at the chest day after day, turning sleep into restless wheezing. The soot carves pathways inside the body, building layers where air should flow. Even those who live are never free of it. The cough follows them, relentless, until breath itself feels like labor. It is called the chimney sweep's cough, but names do little to ease the reality. The body shrinks under this life, but time does not shrink with it. Days stretch into years, yet the boy looks almost unchanged. There is no chance to grow tall, no chance to broaden, no chance to gain the weight of a healthy child. While others step into adolescence, voices changing, limbs lengthening, the sweet boy remains trapped in a shell too small, his body locked by deprivation and damage. He becomes not a boy who grows, but a boy who remains, as though time has forgotten him. Death comes easily to such a body. A slip of the foot, a misjudged turn, a fall through soot-filled dark, and the child is gone. Others suffocate where the chimney narrows, lungs clawing for air that cannot reach them, their small bodies stuck until silence takes them. The city records no age at these deaths. They are simply boys lost to labor, unnamed, their bodies taken away quietly, replaced by another before the house grows cold. Yet for those who survive, survival itself is a strange kind of punishment. To live long enough to leave the flues often means to carry a body too weak to do much else. The bent spine, the ruined lungs, the growth denied. These follow them into whatever scraps of adulthood they may reach. They are men who look like boys, their frames too narrow, their faces aged by strain, yet never filled by health. A body too small to grow old. Sometimes the sweet boy sees other children in the streets, boys of his age, but not of his kind. Their cheeks are round, their arms thick with play and food. They run in open spaces, laughing, chasing, growing with each season. He watches them as though from another world, for in truth, he is. The gulf between them is not simply wealth, but time itself. Those children move forward, while he remains caught in the same frail shell, tethered by hunger and soot. It is said that childhood is a season meant for play, for growth, for learning the shape of the world before stepping into it fully. For the sweet boy, that season is cut away entirely. His world is the flu, his lessons written in bruises, his play replaced with survival. He will never know what his body might have been, had it been allowed to rest, to eat, to breathe clean air. That possibility is gone, stolen by necessity and indifference. On Sundays, when work halts, he sometimes touches the hollows of his ribs, counting them with thin fingers. He wonders if they should be hidden beneath flesh, like the ribs of other boys he sees. He wonders if his legs should be longer, his arms stronger, his chest broader. But his body gives no answers, only silence and the ever-present cough. He cannot imagine himself any other way. The boy he is feels permanent, though in truth it is simply unfinished. The master does not care for such thoughts. To him, the smallness is a gift, one to be used until it no longer serves. When the boy grows, if he grows, he will be less useful. Already, older boys are replaced by younger ones, their usefulness measured by their ability to fit into the narrowest chimneys. What becomes of them afterward is rarely considered. Some drift into other labor, though weakened bodies make hard work harder still. Many simply vanish into the streets, forgotten before their bodies ever had the chance to reach manhood. The boy senses this fate, even without words. He feels it in the way the master looks at him, not as a child, but as a tool, valued only while small. He feels it in the stares of those who see him on the streets, who mark him not as a boy with a future, but as a sweep to be pitied or ignored. His body is too small to hold dreams of age, too battered to carry him far beyond the chimneys. And yet he walks, he climbs, he breathes as best he can. Each day stretches before him like a test his body was never built to pass. Muscles tremble, bones ache, lungs burn, but still he obeys, for what else is there? Childhood is not a shield here. It is the very reason he suffers. He was chosen for his size, and his size will keep him bound until it destroys him. In the stillness of night, when the cellar quiets and only the faint wheeze of breath fills the air, the truth settles over him. He will not grow old, not because of fate, but because the body given to him has been pressed too hard, too long, too soon. It is not weakness of spirit, but cruelty of circumstance. His body is simply too small, too spent, too damaged. The years that might have stretched ahead will never come. And so he closes his eyes, the cough rattling in his chest, the thin frame curled upon the straw. Around him, the city continues its endless churn, its chimneys spitting smoke into the sky, its masters counting shillings, its streets indifferent as ever. Tomorrow he will climb again. Tomorrow his body will bend once more. And tomorrow the truth will still hold. A body too small to grow old cannot escape the fate that waits at the end of every flu. And so, tonight, we have walked quietly through a day in the life of those who once climbed where no light could follow. Children swallowed by brick and soot, whose labor kept the fires of a great city burning. We saw mornings that began in smoke, bodies pressed into flues where air itself turned against them, and nights that never truly gave rest. We felt the weight of hunger, the cough that lingered, and the silence of streets that forgot the names of the smallest who passed through them. It is a history without glory, one that does not end in triumph or celebration, but in the quiet recognition of how much was endured by those too young to have chosen it. A reminder that the comforts of one world are often built upon the unseen suffering of another. I wonder, as you drift deeper into the stillness of your own night, which part of this journey lingered with you the most? Was it the grey dawn that never cleared, the narrow crawl where breath grew thin, or the endless hunger that followed them into sleep? Share that with me in the comments, if you feel like it. I always read them, and together they become a kind of map of memory, tiny lights connecting across distance. And before you let sleep take you fully, remember to subscribe so that more of these forgotten corners of history can find their way to you. With every story we uncover, we stitch together a softer understanding of the past, one that keeps us company in the quiet hours. Rest well tonight, and until we meet again, let the smoke of the city fade and let sleep come gently.